Hello, I'm Christoph Loch, and I have the pleasure and the privilege today to have with me here Lord Karan Bilimoria. Thank you for coming. Karan is the founder of Cobra Beer, now the chairman of the Cobra Beer Partnership. He is an active crossbench member of the House of Lords. He is also vice president of the CBI, the Confederation of British Business, one of the key representations of British businesses, and he's also the incoming president of the CBI. He's also the founding chairman of the UK India Business Council, and he has many other roles that I now don't have enough time to mention. But finally, one thing I do want to mention is that we are fortunate and grateful that he is also the chair of the advisory board of the Cambridge Judge Business School. And Karan, you have been a true supporter of our business school for many years. So thank you again for coming. I'm looking forward to a nice conversation, and I'll just throw a question at you, and then we can start. So you are one of the foremost entrepreneurs in the country. That means you have had lots of experience with the challenges of starting and growing a business and leading it to ups and downs and problems. What advice would you give to some of the enterprises that are struggling right now to survive in this very difficult situation with the pandemic?
Thank you, Christoph, and great to be with you. And it's a real privilege and a pleasure to be the chair of the advisory board of the Cambridge Judge Business School, which, as it happens, is exactly the same age as Cobra Beer, the business that I founded, 30 years old. And as you said, in the 3-decade journey that I've had, I've nearly lost my business 3 times. And I started the business in a recession. When we started, it was a recession. Interest rates were 15% to borrow. And even if you could, it was difficult to borrow, so difficult in a recession environment. It shows you can start a business at any time. And even people can think about starting a business right now in this period we are now, where the words that come to mind are dislocation, anxiety, uncertainty, ambiguity, pressure. That's what we're living in at the moment, but you can still start a business. And I found that the 3 things that saw me through the times I nearly lost my business were always the same. And I think those principles, the one is build a strong brand. Secondly, have a great team and have that team supporting you. And if you have a family, if you're fortunate to have a family, the support of your family in a time of crisis is really important. My wife, who I met 1 year after I started Cobra, has stood by me throughout the ups and downs. And finally, is always behave with integrity. And it's better to fail doing the right thing than to succeed doing the wrong thing. So those are the sort of things that really matter. And all that experience that I've had over these years, I think is helping me now in dealing with this global crisis that we're experiencing. This is like a crisis like none other that I've experienced, that I think anyone in the world. It's a 1 in a century crisis of a demand shock, a supply shock, a domino effect that reverberates all the way through the supply chain, but also a domino effect around the world. So everyone around the world is affected by this crisis.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's, of course, non-trivial thing to say, always act with integrity. And I think that is so true. But let's come to your role at the CBI, your current role and your future role stepping up to president and a member of the House of Lords. You have direct depth of knowledge of the resources and policies that are being designed by the government to help companies during this turbulent time. What do you think are the most important resources available right now? How can companies use the help that the government is willing to give them? And what do you think the CBI might do to help businesses?
CBI has been extremely involved right from the outset in this crisis, and has stepped up to the mark and in many ways led the way. We've set up a coronavirus hub. There's a CBI coronavirus hub that's available to all businesses, not just members. There are daily webinars that take place that thousands of people join. Again, open not just to CBI members, but to anyone. And working directly with the unions, with other business organizations, and directly with the government, with the Prime Minister's office, with the Treasury, with the Department of Business, every single day, many times a day. And so much of the help that the government is giving is done in a collaborative way. And this is why it's working. I think British government was quick off the mark in terms of providing help to business. So Rishi Sunak, our Chancellor, I think has done a very impressive job. In the middle of March, came up straight away with hundreds of billions of pounds worth of support, a £330 billion government guaranteed loan scheme, different types, from the very large companies getting investment grade ability to draw down billions straight from the government with investment grade paper. And already about £16 billion has been raised by the up to 400 largest companies in the country. And at the other end, they've listened, they've continually evolved. There's a CBILS loan scheme, the Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme, for companies with a turnover of less than £45 million, getting up to £5 million, 80% guaranteed by the government. That is not been working as well as we'd hoped. To date, almost 6 weeks after this scheme was launched on the 23rd of March, within the first 6 weeks, about £4 billion and 25,000 companies. Now that's £4 billion out of £330 billion earmarked to loan to companies. I don't think has been flowing through. So we've been putting a lot of pressure, the CBI and other organizations, saying the government should guarantee 100% of the loans. And sure enough, the government has listened. And from May the 4th, they launched the Bounce Back Loan Scheme, which is 100% guaranteed by the government for small companies, sole traders, up to £50,000. So it's a start, but I believe we should be going much further. I think that the Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme, I've been pushing the government, CBI has also recommended that we should have up to £500,000, 100% guaranteed by the government, because that is business needs the cash now. And the Germans are doing this, the Swiss are doing it, equivalent in euros and Swiss francs, 100% guaranteed by the government. And the Swiss model, like the bounce back scheme, the money flows through very quickly. It's very simple for a company to apply, and they get the cash that they need now. But you can't just look at the loan schemes. You've got to look at everything the government is doing. For the retail and hospitality sector, which at the moment is shut, except for takeaways. My own business, Cobra Beer, we supply over 6,000 restaurants. Apart from a few that are doing takeaways, we are closed. Those restaurants are closed. Our only business at the moment is through the supermarkets and the off-trade. So those restaurants that are closed, they've got a business rates holiday for a year, which is helping them. Some of them get grants with a rateable value of less than £51,000. They get a £25,000 cash grant or a £10,000 cash grant. They get a rent where their landlords cannot evict them for 3 months. Businesses are able to delay their taxes, whether it's their VAT returns or their normal tax. They can phone up HMRC, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, and get delay of taxes. But businesses still need cash. You've got creditors who are chasing you. You've got to pay your rent to your landlords. And although there's a 3-month rent holiday, the landlords, some of them are being very aggressive and issuing winding up orders. So now the hospitality industry, which employs 5 million people, is saying, please give us about a 9-month rent holiday, otherwise we will not survive. And so at every stage, the government is iterating, it's listening, it's bringing in measures that were not there. In between £45 million turnover and right up to the investment grade companies, there was a squeeze middle. The government has listened, and now companies up to £250 million turnover can get £25 million loan, 80% guaranteed by the government. Up to £500 million turnover can get 80% guaranteed up to £50 million. But then that still leaves another squeeze middle between the £500 million turnover companies and the very big investment grade. So some of our largest manufacturers who need hundreds of millions of pounds of support, they're still left there. So the government is listening, it's having to work. The charity sector is short by £4 billion and is needed more than ever now. The government listened and has given £750 million of support. Nowhere near enough, but it's a start. So I think the government that way has been working collaboratively, which is good.
And that's very important. And I think it's important also that there's a mixture of some loans to get cash, but also there needs to be a little bit of fresh money like the furloughing scheme. I have seen the furloughing scheme save several companies from bankruptcy because otherwise they would have gotten out of business. So companies also need help of that kind, which is not something where you are just pushing obligations into the future.
And the furloughing scheme, again, the government did that very quickly, where you get 80% of somebody's salary up to £2,500 a month. Already, you've got over 4 million, up to 5 million people on the furlough scheme. This is costing the government over £10 billion a month. This is backdated to March, April. Then again, with the CBI and other organizations, we said, what happens? Is this going to be extended? They listened. It's been extended until the end of June. But again, when we come to the end of June, if there's a cliff edge then and the economy hasn't started opening up fully, there's probably going to be a need for that furloughing scheme to be in some way extended and it also probably needs to be more flexible in allowing people to be part-time. The self-employed people were left out. So there's an equivalent of the furloughing scheme the government brought in. They listened.
Very important, yes.
For self-employed as well. So the Chancellor said right up front, I'm going to do whatever it takes, but I also know I will not be able to help everybody. But to date, I think they are doing a very good job in trying to help everybody. We need to go further.
Yeah, thank you for that. Now, what is your outlook on the British economy as we, at some point, hopefully will emerge from the lockdown? Do you think unemployment will grow critically over the next few months? Now Brexit comes right back, and we have talked about Brexit a number of times. It seems to have negatively impacted several decisions of the government in the context of the COVID crisis. Do you think the Brexit deadline at the end of 2020 will have to be extended?
When it comes to Brexit, the government has made a commitment, it's in legislation, that we will leave the transition period. We've already left the European Union at the end of January, but we will leave in terms of the transition period by the 31st of December. That is what they are committing to doing. But there is a date, the 30th of June 2020. That's the last date by which the UK and the EU can agree an extension. And that extension can be for up to 2 years. And of course, there's a strong argument. People are saying we've got the whole world is coping with this global pandemic. That's what we need to focus on. And the Brexit negotiations, there's a lot to be negotiated. So shouldn't we have an extension period? Well, my view on that's very simple, that at the moment we should be focusing on dealing with the pandemic and the crisis that we have. There's still up to the 30th of June. By then a decision will be made, and I'm sure common sense will prevail at the time. When it comes to the situation, I mean, look at the United States, 30 million people, that's 18, almost 20% of the workforce. I mean, this is unprecedented. Over here, we've got the people who are claiming universal credit, and even in spite of the job, the scheme, the job support scheme and the job retention scheme, in spite of that, people have already lost their jobs. So there is no question about it. 40% of shops are closed. We hear about the tens of thousands of jobs in the aviation industry that are already being lost. So I think the mental and physical toll of this unemployment, of the uncertainty, is going to be absolutely, it's huge already, let alone what's going to come. So people talk about a V-shaped recovery, people talk about a U-shaped recovery, people talk about a bathtub-shaped recovery, people talk about a W recovery, people talk about a depression greater than the Great Depression almost 100 years ago. So I think that this is very serious. I think that it's not a question of bouncing straight back, because we are dealing with a pandemic. And I think the health has to come first. And I think everyone appreciates that this lockdown has been necessary. I don't think anyone is saying, well, you know, and I think it's wrong to create a sort of a false fight between health and wealth. I think the health has to come first, where we have to deal with this pandemic. And if we remember why we got into this in the first place, it was so that we should not exceed the capacity of the NHS. All those awful films we were seeing of Italy with patients lying in corridors, not being able to get into intensive care. We said, whatever happens, we cannot get there. And I think that way this government's done a great job. We've never got anywhere near our critical bed capacity. And we've got to keep in mind, we have hospital beds here that are 3 times less than a country like Germany. Germany has 3 times per capita more hospital beds than we do. But what worked, and I've made this point time and again, is what's worked is when we have collaborative working. The Nightingale hospitals. In 9 days, we set up a hospital in the Excel Center, somewhere where I've actually gone and for exhibitions, where I've gone to make speeches. It's now this giant exhibition center that's been turned into a potential 4,000 bed hospital. 500 of them already up and running, critical care beds. That was done in 9 days. And how was that done? The University of East London, which is next door. The Excel Center, which is private. The armed forces, including the Gurkhas. And the NHS, all working collaboratively together. And you can do it in 9 days. And now we have them across the country. And we have that spare capacity. And if you look ahead as we come out of this, I'm not so worried about a second wave, if there is a second wave of this virus, because we will have the hospital capacity to deal with it, which we did not have coming into this first phase. So that one area, critical area, should give a lot of security to us that we have, including the ventilators, the PPE, the protection equipment. That has been a shambles. And it's been, I think, awful that we are not prepared enough for it. And to me, the worst part about it has been the care homes. We talk about the NHS, but remember, it's a Department of National Health and Social Care. And that is where I think the social care sector has been completely neglected. There are 1 million people, 500,000 in care homes, 500,000 of them in their homes who are being looked after by 1.5 million care workers. They'd had very little PPE, and in most cases none. They were not being tested. They were going into hospital patients and coming back from hospital, back into care homes without being tested. And what is the reality? The WHO has just said in March, over 50% of the deaths in Europe have been in care homes. And over here we're seeing, and we weren't even measuring the deaths, and every death is a sad death, and hearts go out to loved ones and families. We weren't even measuring the deaths in the care homes. Now that area is getting the attention it deserves. So I think if we've got the PPE, we've got the care sector getting the attention, and then you come to the big one, and that's testing. We do not have the testing capacity. Germany has been testing 100,000 people a day, a target we have only just reached in the UK. Over a month ago, they've been testing 500,000 people per week. We need that testing capacity. We've now made it a priority. We've got the testing capacity so that I got COVID-19. I was ill in the middle of March. And when I got ill, I could not get tested. And then I realized, forget me, even the NHS doctors and nurses were not allowed to get tested at that time, only the patients in the hospitals. Then they started to get the NHS doctors and nurses. And now, of course, the care homes and the critical workers, and now anyone going into work. So when you have mass scale testing, you can find out who's got the disease. If they've got the disease, they self-isolate. If they haven't got the virus, you go to work. And then the big game changer is you also need antigen testing, antibody testing. I've spoken about antigen testing, the antibody testing to see if you've had the disease. Good news. Beginning of May, finally we got news that some major pharmaceutical companies have now got reliable, 99% plus reliable antibody tests that can show you with a pinprick within minutes whether you have had the virus. And that means you should have immunity. So I've had the virus, I've had an antibody test to show that I've got the immunity. I can go back into work without infecting anyone and without the fear of being infected myself. And the more and more people that can be released into the workforce that way, that's a game changer. So once you've got the health side, let alone any cures, let alone any treatments, and we haven't got too much good news there, but the blood plasma treatments, for example, that are being trialed that I think are quite hopeful, let alone the vaccine. The vaccine's going to take time. We've got a lot of hope. The Oxford vaccine that might be coming online soon, but let's assume that's going to take some months, maybe even next year. In the meantime, we've got to get the economy going. And I think we've got the health system that can cope if we've got testing and then contact tracing as well side by side, which is being put in place. And most probably people having to wear masks, because then if you've got the disease, it stops you from giving it to somebody else. It may not stop you from getting the disease or mask, the virus, but it'll help stop you from infecting others. Then you can get confidence for people to start going back into work.
So with all this capacity that has now been put in place, do you think we will be in a situation to confidently get out of the lockdown soon?
I'm very confident that given all these factors that I've spoken about that are now very much in place or getting in place, combined with the business support that has to be there. And that business support, I think, will need to be there for a while because I don't think this is a switch off and a switch on. It's going to be a phased coming through. At the CBI, we've referred to it as a restart, a revival, and a renewal. So 3 phases. And in the restart phase, that has to be phased in. So let's assume that in May, early May, the Prime Minister says we can start the economy again. It'll be maybe garden centers and bigger warehouses and production being ramped up. Even we're producing Cobra beer at our breweries, at one brewery at the moment with 1 SKU with a limited workforce for the supermarkets. And just imagine if we can up our production, if we can test the workforce can go into work, if we can make sure they're working safely, we could produce more. So that sort will be encouraged. And then the next, maybe they're talking about primary schools being allowed to start because it shows the children, the younger children, don't get the virus that easily, or if they do, they get it very mildly and they don't seem to infect others as much. These are, this is a very new virus, so we're learning all the time. So that might be that primary schools start again and other levels of schooling. And then the next phase you go after that, you open up a bit more and you allow people to drive more freely. Even public transport, you have to make sure people don't all go in the rush hour. So there are ways we're going to have to manage this. And then the final phase will be, whether it's in 3-week phases, is restaurants and bars opening up with social distancing. And then finally public events down the road when we can go and watch a football match again.
That will be a while. Yeah.
So that might be a while, but you never know.
Yeah. Okay. Now, let's turn this a little bit to other effects of the COVID-19. We are still working. We at the business school here, for example, we are fortunate enough to still be working, but we're working differently. And our little conversation here shows that. How much do you think this will stick? Is this going to continue after, life normalizes again?
I think that if I use my parliamentary experience, so we have got the House of Commons at the moment working in a hybrid fashion. So you've got some people in the chamber and some people taking part in the debates on, like we are now, through Zoom or video conferencing of some sort. In the House of Lords, we're doing it entirely on Zoom. It's now Zoom from this week, but it was another platform before. But video. And I've taken part in, 3 or 4 debates already, and it's worked very well. But there's nothing like being in that chamber and actually having the debates there. So I think from a parliamentary experience, you need to be there, let alone voting. They're experimenting remote voting. But the whole idea of in Parliament, you've got 8 minutes wherever you're on the parliamentary straight, and you've got to physically be there in that voting corridor to get there within 8 minutes and physically vote. It brings people together. I don't think we should go away from that. I think we need to bring back those personal interactions without a doubt. But I think what this will enable is much more flexibility going forward, in that, for example, in this phasing in period of people going back to work, we might still encourage as many people as possible to work from home using what we're doing now to take the pressure off public transport and to ease things in. And then later on, from a travel point of view, it may mean why get onto a flight and go all the way to India when you can do this and carry out many of the meetings this way. And it might save a lot of travel costs and from the environment point of view, be better. So I think people will make much more use. I think it's the head of Microsoft who said in 2 months, we've leapfrogged using this technology, which would have taken years to get to.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, that's what we see here. Now, since we are here at a business school, maybe you could give me a little bit of your semi-external perspective. What do you think business schools can and should do to help organizations as well as employees?
Business schools are perfectly placed to, at a time of crisis like this and looking forward, they are perfectly placed to actually help businesses as such, across the board. Because this is when you've got to, I believe you've got to, in any business, adapt or die. You've got to be flexible. You've got to be ready to learn. And this is a time where the world is changing, where we're going to have to adapt, not only to deal with the crisis now, but adapt given the uncertain future, which could last for months, if not years. This is when you need to be better armed as a business than ever before. The expertise that exists in business schools to learn, whether it's through the courses, whether it's through executive education, to have access to all that is, I think, phenomenal. And I think business schools need to now be more proactive themselves in reaching out and getting those companies involved. And a lot of it can be done like we're doing now. We can be the online part of our learning, which is already there. A lot of our executive programs, like the executive MBA, is a lot of it is online and remote, and some of it is coming and being in Cambridge. It's a mixture of the two. But now we can see we can do even more online and that around the world. So I think that's going to increase much more.
And we'll have to step up to the responsibility. So thank you very much for sharing your witness. Now, maybe you have some final thoughts in these trying times. You said earlier that this is unprecedented. I agree. I have certainly never experienced anything even remotely like this in my lifetime. Are there any other thoughts that you would like to share with our audience?
To me, what is coming to the fore throughout this crisis is the strengths of a country like the United Kingdom. That everyone's focused on how are we dealing with the health crisis at the moment, how are we dealing with the economy right now. But if you look ahead, what's going to actually see us through this in the long term is this little country with 1% of the world's population, which is still the 6th largest economy in the world. And it is still a country that is phenomenal when it comes to innovation and creativity. And our universities are a jewel in our crown. And Cambridge University, which I'm very proud of, we have more Nobel Prizes than any other university in the world. And there's a reason for that. And it's just that creativity and innovation that exists in this country that we need to harness now. That's what's going to propel us forward and enable us to deal with this crisis that we have now. And I'm very confident as a country, with the strength of our universities, we'll be able to go forward and harness that strength of the United Kingdom. And if I may conclude with a business school professor who taught me and who is now heading a leading business school in the United States. He sent me, at the beginning of this crisis, he sent me, said, Karan, here are the 7 C's of leadership in a crisis. And if I read out the 7 C's, he said they are calm, confidence, communicate, collaborate, community, compassion, and cash.
Okay. Makes sense. Very good. That's a very good list. So I just want to say, Karan, thank you very much. Now, I agree with the role that universities can play, and here at the business school, we are trying to step up. Helping the economy to get through this means that we have to reach out and to get in contact to get out of the ivory tower. And we are doing this. We have online programs for entrepreneurs, for management teams. So we are indeed trying to live up to what you just articulated as an ambition that we should have. But thank you, Lord Bilimoria, for being with us, for taking the time and for sharing some of your tremendous wisdom with us, and to the entire audience, thank you for listening, and we both hope that you enjoyed this. Thank you.
Thank you.